Today, we are diving into an incredible story about how a whole society decided to radically change its government. It's a story that has it all: escaping a tyrant, a wild crisis of succession, and, believe it or not, a king who actually argued to get rid of his own throne.
And it all really starts with this one sentence. This is the spark that lights the fire of a political revolution. You got to remember, for the time, this was a completely radical idea. And it came from a place of really bitter experience with a corrupt king.
So our story doesn't kick off in some grand palace. Nope, it begins out in the wilderness with a group of refugees. They're led by this guy named Alma, and they are on the run, escaping the terrible rule of the wicked King Noah.
So after traveling for 8 days, they stumble upon this perfect spot, a land with pure water and everything they need. They literally start from scratch, killing the ground, building a city, and just through pure hard work, they start to thrive. They've built their own little paradise out of nothing.
Now, you'd think the next logical step would be for the people, being grateful and wanting some stability, to turn to Alma and say, hey, be our king. And that's exactly what they do. But Alma says no. And his reason for turning down the crown becomes the philosophical foundation for their entire new society.
Alma's argument here is absolutely brilliant because it's so personal. He's not just talking about abstract political theory, he's pointing right back at their shared trauma, saying, hey guys, remember King Noah? He highlights the fundamental flaw of monarchy. Sure, you might get a good king, but you can't guarantee it. And a bad king, as they all knew way too well, leads to total disaster. His conclusion is this powerful warning: don't ever trust any single person with that much power again.
So, they've built this new community on this powerful idea of equality and no kings. But just when they're starting to get comfortable, their old life comes right back to find them.
An army gets lost out in the wilderness and just happens to stumble right upon their city. And guess who's with that army? The priests of King Noah, the very guys who architected their oppression in the first place. And now they're led by a man named Amulon. And just like that, their freedom is gone. Amulon, who actually used to be a colleague of Alma's back in King Noah's court, takes complete control. He puts them to work, sets up taskmasters, and their new life of liberty turns into a life of harsh servitude.
And this new tyranny wasn't just about politics or economics, it was total. Amulon's decree made the simple act of praying a crime punishable by death. This was a clear attempt to break not just their bodies, but their spirits too. And finally, under the cover of total darkness, an entire civilization is going to try to disappear into the wilderness.
It's a huge gamble, but it works. It works perfectly. And the entire population just slips away into the main kingdom of Zarahemla, while a totally different kind of crisis is brewing. And this one starts right inside the royal family. Get this, the king's own sons, along with the son of the prophet Alma, are leading a rebellion. But it's not a political one. It's cultural. It's religious. They're described as being super charismatic, using flattering words to lead people astray, and all the while secretly trying to tear down the church, which was a huge part of their society.
Well, their rebellion comes to a very sudden, very dramatic end. While they're out doing their thing, trying to destroy the church, bam, they are confronted by an angel. And the experience sounds terrifying, a voice like thunder that literally shakes the ground under their feet.
The result of that encounter is a complete 180. A total reversal. Alma the Younger goes from being the #1 destroyer of faith to its most powerful defender. The great deceiver becomes a preacher. And this huge personal change is about to have massive political consequences.
So this profound spiritual conversion creates a political problem nobody saw coming. When it's time for King Mosiah to name his successor, all of his sons turn him down. They refuse the crown. They're not interested in power anymore. Instead, they want to spend their lives as missionaries, preaching to their sworn enemies. So King Mosiah is left without an heir. But here's the thing. Instead of seeing this as a total disaster, he sees it as a historic opportunity. He decides to use this very moment to argue for ending the monarchy, for good.
He sends out this letter to all his people, and it's basically a masterclass in political philosophy. He explains that a bad king doesn't just rule badly, he creates an entire system of corruption around him. He tears up good laws, puts in his own, and the only way to get rid of him is through a bloody revolution. Mosiah's point is crystal clear. The risk of this kind of destruction makes the whole system of kings way too dangerous to keep around.
So what's his solution? Well, it's to transfer power from one person to everybody. He introduces this radical idea he calls the voice of the people. The core belief here is that while a single person, a king, can be easily corrupted, the majority of the people, well, they usually want to do the right thing. So what he's proposing is a full-blown republic. The plan is to completely get rid of the monarchy and replace it with a system of judges who are elected by the people and have to follow the law. He even builds in checks and balances, a whole hierarchy of judges who are all, at the end of the day, accountable to the citizens. The choice is now up to the entire nation. They can stick with the tradition they've known for centuries, or they can take this huge leap of faith into a new, untested system of governing themselves.
And you know what? The people go for it. Mosiah's arguments are so persuasive that they completely let go of this idea of wanting a king. The record says they became exceedingly anxious for a system where every single person had an equal shot and was responsible for their own actions.
The whole transition is incredibly smooth. The people vote to end the monarchy, then they all gather to cast their votes for who the new judges will be. And in this perfect twist of fate, the once rebellious Alma the Younger is elected as the very first chief judge, tying his personal story of redemption to his nation's political rebirth.
And let's just pause for a second to realize how huge this was. This wasn't some brief experiment with having kings. This system had been in place for 509 years. They were ending half a millennium of tradition with a single vote.
So they've solved the problem of a single bad ruler by putting all the power into the hands of the people. But Mosiah's own warning kind of hangs in the air, leaving us with this fundamental question for any democracy, really. What happens when the voice of the people, the very foundation of this new government, chooses to do the wrong thing? What then?